Hey climbers, welcome back to another episode of Climb by VSC, a weekly show covering the most exciting developments in the world of climate innovation. My name is Jake Kapoor, general partner of VSC Ventures and co-host of Climb. Every week, I or a member of our VSC team will speak with a pioneer in the climate tech world about emerging technologies and novel ideas that will turn the tide on climate change. We've heard enough of the doom and gloom. It's time for stories about purpose-driven innovation that lead to sustainable, positive change. Today's episode is a really special one. My partner Maggie Philbin speaks with Lauren Flanagan, CEO of Sesame Solar, a VSC Ventures portfolio company and one of our earliest climate tech investments. Lauren is excited to share her journey and her many lessons as a multi-time entrepreneur. I'm so happy that you've decided to join us. Now, let's climb.
Hi everyone, welcome to Climb by VSC. Each week, we interview innovative founders, category experts, and the most active climate investors about their perspectives and lessons learned for company building in climate tech. My name is Maggie Philbin. I'm a partner with VSC and a guest host for today's episode on all things disaster relief. I'm excited to be joined by my friend, Lauren Flanagan of Sesame Solar. Lauren's an OG in SaaS who spent her early days working with Steve Jobs during his next days. And now she's turned her attention to restoring power in communities hit by disasters in a healthier way through what she's dubbed Renewably-Powered Nanogrids. Welcome, Lauren.
Hey, thanks, Maggie. Really glad to be here with you.
Oh, I'm ecstatic. Okay, so we have a lot to cover, so why don't we get into it? As someone who's spent decades, actually not decades, just about a decade, I was living in Florida. So
You're making me sound old. We just started.
Oh, no. Actually, I was in Florida. I'm very familiar with hurricanes. And then I traveled out west. And now I feel like I've been followed by another climate disaster, which is obviously wildfires out here. So I would love it if you could share a little bit about your climate journey and how you went from SaaS to solar.
Yeah, sure. So like all of us, I was really horrified after Hurricane Katrina. The damage was just devastating, and many people's lives are still upended. They never could go home to Louisiana. And I was really shocked how unprepared we were. And it really hit me that it's all of our jobs to help adjust to these extreme weather events caused by climate change. Businesses, individuals, changing our behavior, and government. It's not only the job of government. So I wanted to think, what could I do to help? And I was investing and doing a few things in the clean tech arena. And then as we started to have more hurricanes happen and more wildfires and more of these events, I was really struck by we're doing exactly the wrong thing during these. We're sending fossil fuel generators. I understand why we do it. You need power. It's an emergency. It's available. It's easy to use. But it's contributing to the problem. It's adding particulate. It's adding pollution to the air and water, and it's adding noise. And it's really the wrong thing. So I thought if we could break that dirty cycle, if you will, if we could come up with another way to have really good power, fast, easy to deploy, scalable, and clean, that this would be a good solution. And that was really the idea behind starting Sesame Solar.
For people who don't know Sesame Solar, can you describe a little bit about what it is that you do?
Well, we make what we call mobile renewably powered nanogrids. So a nanogrid is our name for the energy structure, which could look like a construction trailer or a container, like a shipping container on a flatbed. So they're mobile and they can be towed by a regular truck or a bigger truck for the container. And then inside these nanogrids are emergency offices and essential services. They could be communications, clean water, device charging, medical assistance, all kinds of additional off-grid power. And then the power to run them is supplied by solar, battery storage, and green hydrogen. And we can talk a little bit later about what green hydrogen means, but that's two ways to provide power to the battery. And the power is accessed from the battery. So whether you're plugging in an EV or a medical defibrillator or an electric wheelchair or your phone, all of that is being charged from an outlet that is powered by the battery. And then the battery has the different sources of energy, whether it's solar, wind, or green hydrogen.
Wow. It actually sounds really complex. How did you go from working in software to now still, I understand software is still part of the business, but it's also the hardware component too. My brain doesn't understand like how you can make that switch. What was that experience like?
Well, my motto is always be learning. I'm always learning new things. And one of my things that I think I'm good at is starting companies and advising companies. And if you can find a narrow problem that's a really big pain point that you can solve that potentially is scalable, that's a really good business. So as opposed to saying everything that you could do in climate change, we're just picking one thing. We're doing the wrong thing in disaster response. If we could fix that, then we could potentially have a much bigger market beyond disaster response. So that was where I started as sort of a principle. And then the lens was, okay, it has to be easy to use. So it has to be high tech, low tech. Training has to be built in because in an emergency, you're not going to read the manual. Experts aren't there. It has to be mobile. You've got to get the power to the people when and where they need it. And it has to be able to be starting up immediately. You fire up a generator and in 10 minutes, you're in business. It's the same with our nanogrids. So we started with those kind of first principles of what we had to do to address the problem. And it was a very narrowly defined problem. And so that's how I think. I mean, that's just an analytic approach, which I've used in every business I've been in. Then yes, learning the technology, but I brought in co-founders that, Namit Janwar, I call him our energy wizard. He's a, very brilliant guy who came up with a lot of the energy side of it. And I've learned a lot from him and we've learned a lot together. And I brought in our mechanical genius, Adam Casefang, who's our co-founder who can make anything. And it was really the three of us and a couple of interns as we started. And we've gotten product market fit with big customers, from telco and broadband, to the Air Force, to counties and governments, both U.S. and foreign. And so we've had the products out in the market now and they're working. And we can spread more broadly to other markets in the future. But right now we're very focused on, renewably powered disaster response.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense now. I'd love to hear too, as you're working with the Air Force and other groups, how are they using it now today? Like, we just had that hurricane out in Naples, Florida. Like, how is it going?
Yeah, so Ian, of course, devastated Florida, particularly on the Gulf side of it. And one of our customers, Comcast, deployed two of our nanogrids that they call crisis response units at their facility near the airport in Fort Myers. And they also had two large trailers, 60-foot trailers of toilets, showers, and laundry. And we had just a plug between our nanogrid and those trailers. So we powered the lights and the hot water and the cooling because it actually was hot there after the hurricane. And then they had Wi-Fi vans, which we also powered. So we were treating, helping up to 300 people a day from first responders, citizens, and Comcast employees who could come in and get help, get their phones or devices charged or get a new phone. They could use the facilities to clean up. They could use the Wi-Fi there to call their friends and family and coworkers and let them know they're okay. And those were like fundamental things that you need after an emergency where you may be left with the clothes on your back. And you just need to get yourself settled till you can move on to the next step of your journey. And we've actually done that for a few, Cox, Comcast, the Public Ministry in Health in Dominica after Hurricanes Maria, Ida, and Ian. We've been there with this kind of response. And in Dominica, actually, it's working more than just emergency response. This is now an adjunct to the clinic that we were backing up in Grand Fond. And it's providing everyday patient triage, clean water, 130 gallons of clean water a day. We're filtering from rainwater, refrigeration for medicines, backup power, Wi-Fi, all things which they didn't have before we were there due to the really serious instability of the grid.
Did you see a difference in how Puerto Rico responded after a natural disaster to how we do it, stateside in Florida, for instance? Is there a difference or is there similarities?
Yeah, there were far fewer resources in Puerto Rico, and the grid is really just very challenged in Puerto Rico is the nicest way I could say it. And there were hodgepodge efforts, but, there was a lack of response in the same way that we would have stateside. And I think that was a little bit about our government's priorities. But be that what it may, there are a lot of large organizations that are trying to come in and help reimagine the grid in Puerto Rico and come up with distributed energy resources, which will complement large microgrids. So a lot of the plans are to replace this poor grid with large solar microgrids, but you also need distributed energy resources. That's what we call our nanogrids because they're mobile. They can move around. So something hits a big grid, it could still go down. But if you have mobile units that can get to the people when and where they need it, that's an important part of the overall solution.
That's a great point. And you mentioned earlier that it's important that these are ready to go and they're rapid, but you never really know how to prepare for the disaster almost when it's like the week of, right? Or the 2 weeks before you see the hurricane coming through. So when you're out pitching to work with these partners, how are you getting on their radar and letting them know that it's important to get ahead of it and not wait until the last minute? Because how quick could you really deploy? Like, could you be in Florida that fast? I mean, I'm sure there's so much red tape you have to go through. So what is that like?
Well, first of all, we're doing active outreach to state and federal agencies. We've signed some counties in California. They recognize they need to be prepared in advance of wildfires and PSPS, public safety power shutoff, that's happening in California. And they have mandates from the state that they have to be more resilient and start to use less fossil fuels. So they know they have to move in this direction. And it was really interesting. We made a demonstration nanogrid when we launched of our new green hydrogen powered, backup powered emergency office. We did it as a thought starter, trying to show some of the functionality. But as we showed this to the counties, they said, we want that. We want exactly what you've made, because that's perfect. We can charge our Ford F-150 trucks we've ordered and tow the nanogrids with the electric truck. We can charge some electric wheelchairs and defibrillators. People can charge their phones and devices. We need that emergency office to have our teams be able to work inside and outside of it. We need the restroom. We need the refrigerator, the water. We want not only the 5G mesh network you have, but we want AT&T FirstNet special responder network. So they wanted a few extra things for what we'd built. So that was like very exciting, that what we thought was just a thought starter is actually something the market wanted, because it was very complete.
Yeah. As you're describing all of the things that the nanogrid can morph into, it reminds me of like a transformer. It just keeps like shape shifting into new things. So what is the most common use case? Is it the clean running water? I'd also imagine just people really want Wi-Fi. You know, they want to be able to like get back online to whether connect with friends or family, let them know they're safe, or probably get back to work. But what do you see as the most interesting or most widely
the
used or
fundamental
accepted?
need is export power and an emergency response office. So you can have people there to talk to people who are affected and help give them directions. That's number one. Mm-hmm. And then second, they want communications. So they want to be able to charge their devices and, if possible, get on a Wi-Fi to connect with their loved ones because they maybe been separated. And then if they're first responders, like I said, they want their own separate first responder channel. So we're able to have two different kinds of networks. And then usually in an emergency, you need clean water. And so the ability to filter various water sources to make it potable, that's important. So those are really the fundamental. And then in many cases, they want medical access, medical help. Those are another things that are needed. So those are the most common applications for emergencies.
Okay. At the top of our call here, you mentioned that you use first design principles. And I'm wondering how you decided that going the green hydrogen route was the right way. Because it seems like a simple idea, or maybe not simple, but the route would be just plug into the grid. But you've actually designed this so it's completely standing on its own and just using green hydrogen and sunlight. So what made you get to that conclusion?
Well, the need for having energy autonomy for days or weeks at a time is common after an extreme weather event. So in California, where you are, after wildfires or PSPS, it could be a matter of days or a week, and then the power generally comes back on. In Florida, it's going to be months for some parts to get power again, right? After Hurricane Ian, it's really devastating. And so if you have to keep taking it back to another location to charge it on the grid or bring in diesel fuel, you're really compounding the problem. And fuel is not always easy to get after emergency, and maybe the roads are blocked. And then you have to leave the site to go back and recharge and come back. So it's not a complete solution if you have to do that. Whereas if you just can keep running with various energy sources, then that's a really good disaster solution. So it's coming from that solutions lens. Then, okay, how do you do it? Well, solar isn't always efficient at night, in the snow, during wildfires when there's a lot of smoke in the sky. And so it might only produce half of the capacity that you need. So if you can charge the batteries another way, you can put a wind turbine in, a small wind turbine that will be in a mobile unit. And then green hydrogen was the other obvious way. But using green hydrogen as a backup is another way to power the batteries. And then while they're recharging, then you can wait till the conditions are better for solar. And so that creates this energy loop. And it's green hydrogen because the electrolysis is powered by the battery, which was first powered by the solar or by the fuel cell. Either way, it's clean energy. And the electrolysis splits the water into hydrogen and oxygen. We vent the oxygen. We dry and compress the hydrogen to low pressure, like 300 psi, like an aerosol can. And then that's stored solid state in safe tanks, and that fuels the fuel cell. And we make the hydrogen a little faster than we use it. Plus, we can store any excess. And therefore, you can keep this loop going. The inputs needed are sunshine and water. And we can even filter the water to a level that we can use the water from, say, a river or a municipal water source.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Yeah, we're first to do that. I mean, there's stationary hydrogen, but making it mobile is hard. And then our innovation was that it's backup. That's really the right way to design the system.
How many iterations did you have to go through to get to where the nanogrid is today?
Oh, it's been a process. This is our 5th year in business, and we get it better every time. But, we learn. And for example, one of our low-end solar nanogrids, for which we've had some large contracts for PSPS in California, the first time we made it, it took 2 months. Now we can make one in 4 days. So we've really gotten it down to a good manufacturing process. But that took some iterations before we went from 2 months to 4 days. Now with green hydrogen, we'll have to do the same thing. It's probably not going to be 4 days, but we can get it down to a much faster process. And then a key part of our value proposition is that we are component agnostic. And because we use plug and play elements like Lego blocks, literally extruded aluminum and connectors and various substrates or materials, we can make things in any dimension. So we're not locked into a form factor that only can support one kind of battery or one kind of fuel cell or one kind of electrolyzer. We can use any of them that we may want because we easily can adapt. So that's a really great advantage because as new technologies come out, better fuel cells, better electrolyzers, more efficient batteries, we're looking at solid state, we'll easily be able to take the best of those on the market and bring them to bear. So to your point, we're always innovating.
Mm-hmm. But I want to go back for 1 second for anyone who's listening and doesn't know what PSPS stands for. Can you just describe that to everybody?
Public Safety Power Shutoff.
Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect.
It's a California mandate.
Okay, wonderful. And I've done a ton of research, and obviously we worked together. And I know that it was important that you decided to make your nanogrid stateside, and you're a Michigan-based company. Can you talk a little bit about, your manufacturing process? I'm just curious how you do all of this in the U.S. because it's so common that we would, build things in other countries, Vietnam, China, and then ship them to America, which just really compounds travel and carbon. So I'd be curious about your decision to do that here in the US.
Well, that was another thing. And one of the advantages of being in Michigan, I'm actually a native Californian, and I probably wouldn't have done this in California. In Michigan, there's so many manufacturing resources here, and there are a lot of suppliers in the Midwest. So we can reduce our carbon footprint as a manufacturer. And actually, the cost of foreign manufacture, you have to really consider all the overhead and supply chain issues and delays. It's becoming less attractive. And now with a lot of the incentives, like the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there are lots of incentives for doing more in the U.S. But we always had this on our plan to be made in Michigan and made in USA. And we think that's a real strength. Our customers love it because we're able to say made in USA. It's really appealing to government and large corporations to have that as part of our value proposition.
I love that. So talk to me a little bit about what it's like recruiting in Michigan. Do you find that you can get great talent there, or are you a remote company where you'll hire from any good talent anywhere? What's that like?
Well, we're hybrid. So the factory, everybody has to be there, obviously, you're making things. But engineering, sales, and marketing are work from home and come to the factory as needed, but that's an infrequent thing. In terms of hiring in Michigan for factory talent, most of them are technicians and engineers. It's a very good environment. There are a lot of skilled tradespersons. Because you actually we're making things, right? This is real manufacture. You have to know how to measure and read blueprints and cut and weld. And, in volume, we can move to robotic welding in some parts of 3D metal printing, but there's still that making it stuff. So a lot of our technicians, they studied shop in high school and they were fixing cars in their garages and they took welding classes. What we're doing is upskilling them and giving them additional training so they can really be advanced manufacturing contributors and learn about 3D metal printing and learn about robotic welding and learn about flow manufacturing. And we've actually brought in some consultants as coaches from the auto industry to help upskill our team. But we're very conscious about a diverse team, building diversity in every aspect of that, from point of view, from where you've lived, if you speak another language, being a veteran. It's not just gender and race. It's really every aspect. We have every religion celebrated amongst our team members, and we celebrate that aspect of us. We have kind of a threefold triple bottom line mission: people, planet, profits. And it's first about the people, the people in our team who are going to serve the people who work for our customers, really focusing on making those people delighted with the services. And then about the planet, of course, we're trying to have an adaptation to this climate change. We're not going to solve it, but we're going to help at least not contribute to it and learn to adapt. And then finally, profits, because that's what primes the pump and makes a good business model that allows us to continue to innovate.
Was it a no-brainer for you to have a triple bottom line?
I strongly believe in that kind of purpose. And I think that when you have a mission and purpose-built company like we do, you can attract better talent and you can attract people's loyalty. And I don't want to in any way diminish any of our technicians, but we had a guy who kind of a hardcore guy, right? And he's a manager at our company, and he comes out of this welding mold. And when I told him we were trying to, donate some nanogrids for Ukraine, particularly to help mothers and newborns, he was like really touched. He got a little emotional about it. And he said, that would be so great. And so you can't underestimate the impact of purpose on getting people to care and to do a better job. And also, if you care about them, if you treat your employees very well, then they're going to in turn treat your customers well. And so it really starts from that purpose, the view of respect, having diverse teams who respect one another. That is really a key part of our recruiting process. And people either like that or they don't. This is not, trying to get people with pedigrees climbing the ladder. This is about trying to make a real difference in the world, not only in what we do, but how we do it.
Was that always your philosophy? I say this because you hear about the old boys club in Silicon Valley, and I know that you were in California in the early days of your career. And so I'd love to know about good times or bad times and how that has really transformed the way that you're thinking about the company that you're building and future startups too.
Yeah, so I've always wanted to, make products or services that make the world better in some way, maybe your life better or your work better. And as I've, gotten more mature, I want to have a more impact on this existential problem that we're facing of climate change. When I was in the early days of Silicon Valley, you mentioned that I had a software company that worked closely with Steve Jobs. And, we were in this whole world where, make great stuff, think different, make a difference. Yeah. But a lot of the environment in terms of how people worked was pretty toxic. It was exciting to do great things, but it wasn't always great for women or persons of color. And the workloads were tough. And I used to think it was great to work 70, 80. You just saw Elon, wants everybody to work long hours. Well, that's not necessarily conducive to a happy life. So as I've matured myself over the years, I realize taking care of people is the most important thing. It's not about working so hard. It's about working smartly with great purpose and vision. And so it's like they tell you on the airplane, put your oxygen mask on first. We've got to take care of our people and do it in a healthy way. And I think that's what gets really great work. Of course, there's times and deadlines. You've just got to put in that elbow grease and the long hours. Sometimes there's no replacement for it. But that should be the exception and not the everyday norm, because it's not sustainable. People crash and burn. And we've seen so many early stage companies that there's mental health issues with the founders or with key team members. And that doesn't help the world. I think it's a combination of maturity and just my own experiences of like, I don't want to do that anymore, right? I don't want to live that way, and I don't want to make anybody live that way.
Yeah. I was just reading a really interesting story in Fast Company. There was a founder who was talking about bringing joy into the workforce, or like into her startup. And she was like, I'm taking 4:30 to 7:30 off every day. I want to be home with she has young children, it sounded like. So young kids, I want to be home from 4:30 to 7:30. What do you say to your coworkers or your employees and staff that ask for such things too? Do you hear about that? What are some cool maybe policies or programs you put in for Sesame?
Well, we built it in with the factory because many of our technicians have young families. And so they work, 7 to 3:30. So many of them get home to pick up their daughters or sons from school, or to be there until their wives come home. A lot of people are dual income families in Michigan. And so we built that into the system. And always, if there's any issue with your family first, of course, it's okay to go leave and be with your family. That's really important. Our work from home folks, they can make their schedules. It's just get the work done. And we've recruited heavily from a group called the Mom Project, which is stay-at-home moms. We love them. They're fabulous. Nobody's a better multitasker than a mom who's got kids she's schooling and helping and everything else and gets her work done. And this is a fabulous resource. So we totally prioritize the health of the family time. And again, I think that makes for a better team, a stronger team, and a more committed team.
Oh, I love that. Have you found that it's been more receptive to find VCs that also align with that philosophy, or are they, just focus on the bottom line?
Well, of course, we're only looking for the right VCs that will work with us. One of our advantages is, and this is again a maturity thing, having not done this in early days, I was determined from day one that our unit economics were going to be profitable. And then it would be just a case of get enough transactions and the company would be profitable. So if you have good unit economics, you're going to have a lot more interest from VCs. I think more and more they're becoming a little more culturally receptive, particularly the newer funds. But in the old Silicon Valley, they're pretty much, that view of young people not married, especially guys who can work all hours of the day. Well, I will just say that doesn't always yield to the best outcomes. And so I think a holistic view of what's right for people, what's right for the planet is going to yield a better outcomes. And I think that these VCs should realize that women understand this. They should put more money behind women. I think women are going to make some better decisions, be better managers, and they're going to take the culture more seriously. And we're looking for those kind. We're fortunate to be able to be a profitable company. And so we can wait and pick the right investors who have the right match for us, as opposed to be desperate for money. And I think that's a strong position. If anybody's looking at being a founder, I would always strongly urge you, focus on profitable unit economics from day one and get to break even quickly, because then you have options and choices versus having to do what the market wants you to do or the capital markets insist on.
Okay, that's a mic drop right there. And I know that you've actually invested in, how many female founders have you invested in? Because I know you're involved with Springboard. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I've invested 40. A lot in women. I really believe in paying it forward. I've spent a lot of my career helping women founders learn about how to grow their businesses, how to get access to capital, human and financial capital, expert capital to help them. I do that through Springboard. And then as I started Sesame Solar, this was really my next, focus in my life, was to really give back towards addressing the existential crisis of our time, which is climate change. And so, I've invested and I've helped. Right before I got on this, I had a call with some of my limited partners in my fund, Bell Capital, and we're going over our portfolio and what ones are working and which ones aren't. And it's all about a learning. And so the learnings are good. And I've tried to provide those learnings as much as I can as part of my give back.
Okay. So beyond unit economics, I'm curious, in getting profitable from as the focus from day one, what are some other learnings that not even just female founders that are listening, but founders in general, that they should take into consideration, especially when wanting to start in the climate space?
Well, the most important decisions you make are, first of all, what's the problem you're going to solve? And instead of trying to boil the ocean, pick a narrow one that if you got it right, could be scalable into something big, but that you can do something small, because that's going to be less capital intensive. And you have a chance to try to prove it out in a narrow way that you can then broaden. So that's just a general approach. Second, your founders are essential. Your co-founders. You've got to find people who are better than you are at the things that you're not good at. I mean, you just have to, right? And so having complementary founders. I mean, I used to play sports in high school, and you just really learned on a team. It wasn't the stars of the team that made the team. It was the teamwork and the people who didn't drop the ball, who always had your back, who were working hard in practice. It's really about that kind of team. So thinking about that from day one, from your founders and the new people you bring in, it's so critical, the early hires. You can't rush it. You can't just say, I'm going to hire a lot of people at once. You have to really carefully pick those in the beginning, because you will win or lose on those early hires.
Had you ever made a mistake that you can share, that a lesson learned?
Totally. I've done some terrible co-founders. And
Okay.
I will not say the names to protect guilty. But I had one VC so bad, it actually propelled me into, you know what? I mean, he actually said to me when we were disagreeing on something, he goes, Lauren, you don't know the golden rule. I'm like, of course I know the golden rule. No, he goes, them with the gold makes the rules. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? When I'm an investor, I'm going to practice the real golden rule, which is to treat people the way you'd like to be treated. I was so galvanized by that. It motivated me to make a difference there. And so, yeah, I've had some everything I'm telling you is because I've made every mistake in the book. I have not done all these things I'm saying, but I have learned how to do them over time. And that's why I'm good now.
Damn. Okay. So instead of lessons learned, how about your most memorable career highlights? What are you most proud of?
Well, most recently, I'm proud of our launching our, green hydrogen nanogrid. I mean, first to market. In April of 4th, 2021, we had lost a potential contract we really worked hard to get with the state of California. We'd had a mobile nanogrid for emergencies, but we'd had some backup diesel power, and we ended up getting dinged for that. And I was so mad, and I'm having my tea in the morning. Went back to bed, had my tea, and I was like, F diesel, we're going to have green hydrogen from now on. And so I call up Namit, my co-founder, and I said, we're going to go do green hydrogen, not any more diesel backup. And he's like, well, Lauren, I don't know much about green hydrogen. I said, me either, but we're going to go learn. And so we had to go through a few vendors. We had to read a lot, to jump into it, and newbies. And June 16th of this year, just 14 months later, we launched the world's first mobile nanogrid for emergency response with solar batteries and green hydrogen. I'm very proud of that. That's fast. That's super fast to add a very complex technology in a short period of time, to do a lot of learnings. And then we set goals for selling them, and we're hitting those. So, that's execution. We have got a great team.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to talk about execution, because you really killed it. I will say also because I worked with you not only as an investor through VSC Ventures, but through our agency on the PR side. And so for founders who are wanting to bring on PR, I'm wondering if you have advice on when you think as a founder it's the right time to say yes or no. Like, this is the time we should tell our story, or we're not ready yet. Especially everything that happened in June with announcing the nanogrids. Is your take on that?
Well, it certainly has been great working with VSC, both as an investor and VSC PR. I mean, that has really put us on the map, and we have all this inbound. So before, we were kind of low profile, pretty much deliberately. We were trying to learn from the market. I didn't want to do a lot and make a mistake. I wanted to be somewhat stealth to make sure we had product market fit. So I would say that you don't want to go out too early that you're selling vaporware. It's good to be able to have a new product or a major customer deployment. And then later, you can talk about your funding, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's really vaporware. I mean, I was in the early days of the computer business, and people that would be selling, they were in their Aeron chairs with their T-shirts, and they didn't have a product yet. I mean, we were on, old doors on sawhorses and old filing cabinets we got at the secondhand store and crappy chairs for a long time until we were profitable. And then they got the Aeron chairs as an award for doing better, for going the extra mile for a customer. But I saw so much of that. So I think it's important to be real. So you have a real product, you've got a real team, could be small, you've got your first real customers, and then you want to pick, it's very important, your PR. Just like you need a top legal, you need top accounting, you need top PR who really gets you and gets your market. And I picked VSC because when I went out and looked at the companies you were doing and the articles, and you already knew the reporters. I knew you knew all the people I wanted to talk to. And so it's just, I had to persuade you guys that you should invest in us and that you should take us on as a client. Which you have to be good at your job as a CEO to do that.
Yeah, that's true. What are some, as you're making the evaluation of an agency, what did you, beyond, okay, yes, they tell the stories, but what was the vetting like? Like for a founder who's might be listening, first time founder, let's say, and they're trying to understand, like, okay, is this...
To me, it was all about incoming leads. And so I was like, great to have nice articles, but I want to translate that into how's that going to make sales? And so we've had metrics around that. And I think it's really important to build that in. And that's been the most fantastic is just the inbound. I mean, there were a couple of companies we worked for over a year to get in and nowhere. And then they read an article and then in LinkedIn approached us. And I mean, that was fantastic. There's a military agency, I can't name it, but I was trying for 2 years and no one would answer anything. No email, no phone call, nothing. We knew they needed us. They read an article. We're going to close the deal before the end of the year. So that happened in a couple of months. So that's like, boom, like, why do you do it? That's why you do it.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love to hear that.
Start to reach out to you too. So we didn't per se pitch investors, but they start reading about it. And then that helps you begin the relationship because people who come to you, that's a little easier than you chasing them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know our time here is coming to an end. Is there anything else I should have asked you today that we didn't get to talk about?
Well, maybe, a lot of people want to move into climate change. They want to make a change in their life, like I did. I wanted to go from, all the things I was doing to make an impact on climate change. And so I very consciously thought, what could I do? I'm good at starting companies. And I talked about some of the principles that I used to figure about Sesame Solar. But I think as you think about wanting to get into climate change, a good thing to do is to work at a company where you can get very good experience. And then if you want to start a company, after you've learned that domain experience, find that narrow problem that you could solve and use that to go into it. I just interviewed a woman yesterday who I hope we hire. I don't know if it'll happen or not, but she did a complete reinvention of herself. And I was very impressed by that. So she'd been in the energy industry for a number of years, very successfully. And then a few years ago, she decided I'm going into renewables. So she went back to school, got a master's in energy management. She joined every, green energy thing she could and volunteered and this and that, and is working in a clean energy company now. And, so she prepared herself. So when I looked at hiring a candidate, it's like, okay, this is a person willing to learn, willing to make the commitment. And so I'm willing to bet on someone like that they'll continue to learn. They'll bring that learning mentality. So I think if you can demonstrate that and join a lot of different organizations and show your learning, that people will take a chance on you. And if you want to found a company, go get some knowledge first, do your deep research, and then figure out the small problem you can solve.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. I really appreciated that. And I the woman that you're speaking of, I see a lot of similarities too, even with your story of how you were like, I heard what was happening. I wanted to go out and figure out what the problem was. And then I went out and found the right team to make it happen. And it's also like a reinvention of your thoughts. And I think the biggest takeaway that I hear from this call today is the 3 Ps: people, problem, profits. So with that, I'll leave us to go. And I'll let you go off and solve this massive problem that you're out to solve. And I wish you all the best. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Maggie. It's always a pleasure to spend time with you. And we love working with VSC PR and VSC Ventures. It's been a wonderful addition to our team. That's also very important. Pick the right investors.
Oh, thanks, Lauren.
Well, that's it for this week's episode of Climb by VSC. Thank you so much for watching and listening. A few quick shout outs before you go. Our thanks to Lauren Flanagan for sharing her time, energy, and passion with us. You can learn more about her amazing work at www.sesame.solar. Special thanks to Credo for their help in producing and promoting this episode. To visit any part of today's conversation again, you can find the full transcript on vscventures.com. Our thanks to Josue Ramiro for editing and posting those every week. Lastly, if you've listened this far, please leave us a rating on Spotify or review on iTunes. It only takes a few seconds, really helps us out, and as far as I know, still carbon neutral. Well, that's it for now. We'll see you next week on Climb by VSC.